Well, today on such a beautiful day, we're going to do a little bit of everything. I want to get these two bikes on the road, this one back on the road, that one back on the road. So what I noticed on here is I left the gas tank empty of fuel over the winter. So I have muriatic acid and a little bit of apple cider vinegar cooking the inside of my tank here. I'm not timing that. I really should be. So hopefully that does its job and I can get that tank back on. The other thing I noticed when I pulled it off is my vent hose right here is deteriorating, and it was actually leaking fuel. I thought both tanks were empty because it does have a spare tank or a secondary tank. So I pulled this tank off, and while that happened, I had a fuel spill coming out of my tank here. So this tank was full, which is great because then I don't have to take off the rear wheel again. We all did that last year. Don't need to do it again. Don't need to make another video. So as soon as that tank is clean, I should be able to throw it back on here, and this bike should be ready to go down the road. The only other thing I did notice is I had a small leak, possibly clutch slave cylinder leak. I'm gonna have to monitor that. If the clutch doesn't work, then I know I'm going in here for the clutch slave cylinder. May need to put a new gasket on that. Like I said, other than that, the Shadow should be good to go. This bike, if you watched the EX500 first ride video, did not have a speedometer or anything on the left side of the gauges. And when I looked at the bike, I realized this cable was not here. That was in a bucket of parts that I got with the bike. So unknowing to me, for some reason, this cable was not connected. All it does is screw in down here. I do not have the holder that should be here on the fender. I'm gonna have to steal that off my other one or source one. So it screws in down there, and then it runs up behind the gauges and it screws in right in there to the back of the gauges. So hopefully it seems free and it seems fine, so it should work. Okay, so that's taken care of. I noticed the front brake wasn't working great, so that's what we're going to do today, amongst everything else. Oh, before I get to that, the other thing I noticed was I had a small gasoline leak on the EX500. So I'm hoping it was just leaking from around the top here. It looked like it wasn't leaking down here. It was just up in here. So what I did, took it all off, cleaned up the metal around where this seats, and then I did use some gasket material around the gasket and the top where it seals, and then put some on the bolts. So if it leaks, it's not leaking from there, and I probably need to rebuild the actual fuel petcock. But I think that's okay, because I have a little sealer here. This just presses in. That's where your fuel line goes on, and this is your vacuum line. So I think we're going to be fine with that. So back over here, I haven't been into this system yet, but we're just gonna pull out the old fluid, because I do have some DOT3 brake fluid here. Should have plenty to do this job. And I don't know, haven't even taken the top off of this yet. Okay, that's pretty tight. So don't lose your screws. I don't know what I'm gonna have to do to get this free. It's pretty solid. Oh, I didn't want to do that, but I did. Okay. Fluid looks good. Fluid looks pretty clean. Maybe I'll just bleed the air out of it. Looks like somebody just didn't have enough topped off in there. I don't know. Well, I'm gonna work on, let's see, get the gasket back down. Set this aside. So maybe there's some air in the system. I'm gonna fill this up and then start to bleed it. If the fluid looks good, I might just use what's in there. Then again, who knows what's in there, so I'll start on that job. Alright, well, exactly what I thought was going on here was happening. So there was air in the system, and I needed to bleed this bolt right here, this banjo bolt, because air can get locked in there. So the fluid inside was fine, I believe, but this was coming the whole way in. When you pulled on this, it would come the whole way into the handlebar, and that is not supposed to happen. When you pull this, you want firm pressure way before the handlebar. Okay, so what I did was crank this up 4 or 5 times, maybe even 6 times, just so you have full pressure build up. And then while you're holding this in, take a 12 millimeter, make sure it's a box end wrench or something, not a ratchet, because all you want to do is crack this real quick. You can have a towel under here or a rag, because fluid will come out, but you're going to hear some air. If you hear air, you know you're needing to bleed air out of that system. So when fluid comes out of here, well, all you do is just quick crack it, because the air is what you wanted to escape. You don't need the fluid to come out. So pump this up and you hold it, and then you crack that and shut it real fast. And then you don't let this lever go until you have this shut, because then you're just letting air back in there. So pull this in, build up pressure. You see the air pressure coming up in the reservoir. So pump this up, hold it, crack that, and then this will slide down to the bar, because you're letting air in the system. Crack that real quick, hold this down, shut that, and then you can leave this back up. After I did that, no more problems. That firmed up within the next couple pulls, and then I came down here and did the same thing. Build up pressure with the handle, and then as you're holding the handle, crack this open. If you see air bubbles come out, you know there was air in the system. Crack it, shut it real fast. Then you can leave the pressure off of the lever up there, the brake lever. And basically, if you're getting full pressure like that, if you're able to pull this and it's solid without coming to the bar, you're probably in pretty good shape. I'm happy with what I have now. That is definitely way better than it was, and I trust that I have all my air out of the system. So now I can pull this hose off. The other thing you want to make sure, now you are shutting this before you let your lever loose, but you want to make sure that your other end of your hose is in some brake fluid, so you're not sucking air up through the hose. It would take a while with this length of hose, but definitely don't want to take the risk. So that's all there is hydraulic on this motorcycle. If you were on the Shadow, which I'm going to have to work on the clutch is also hydraulic. Here, your clutch is only cable operated, so you don't have any hydraulic systems to work on here. And the rear drum, the rear brake on this is just a manual drum brake, so you don't have to worry about hydraulic system on the 1991. The 94 over there that we're gonna have to work on, yes, that is also hydraulic on the rear, so we're gonna have to bleed that out. And probably the same exact thing, although that's gonna need a full rebuild, so that's gonna be a bigger project. So I think that's it for this one. I'm going to top off the fuel here. I'm going to top off the .3 brake fluid. Make sure I don't want to fill the window, because I want to be able to see where the level is. And it's pretty good right now, but I'll go up just a little bit more. As you can see, this side is pretty close to the edge, so that's probably pretty good. I'll put a little bit more on. Make sure your cap's clean and put it back down and tighten the bolts. So that's it for bleeding the brakes on this bike. And tomorrow I think we'll ride this thing, because the tank should be ready to go. And the only thing I need to do yet is try to get bolts in here, because this holds the front fairing in place and it's super loose right now. And if these bolts aren't in here, obviously you can see that's broken. These mirrors don't really stay where I want them, especially this one. This one's loose. I don't know if that's ever gonna stay where I want it. Wonder if I take this bolt out. Not sure if I can save this one. Might need a new mirror. But at least I want to get 2 bolts in there to make sure that this thing isn't jumping and moving around. Alright guys, I think that's it for my work here on video today. And now you know how to bleed out your brakes. Catch you on the next one. Come back and see us ride.